Hello everyone and welcome to English 3 third lesson entitled Making Comparisons, presented by Mrs. KOHIL, an assistant teacher at Higher School of Industrial Technologies, Annaba. Let us take a look at our course objectives. So in this lesson, we are going to review comparatives and superlatives, intensifiers and de-intensifiers, as well as we are going to discuss many topics related to the environment. A question: how could spending your holiday at home reduce your impact on the environment? I already discussed this question with my students when I gave a typical example. Let us say that you want to travel from the east to the west to enjoy the scenery of the west. So, it involves you traveling by plane, okay? So first of all, you need a ticket, which is, let's say, it entails printing the ticket, the printing process, let's say the production of the paper itself is very harmful to the environment. The printing process as well. Also, it means that you would take the public transportation or use your car to travel to the airport, which is more likely situated in the outskirts of your town, which would beget or entail a huge amount of CO2 emissions from your car or the public transportation as well. Also, you will likely arrive at the airport. You will take the plane, which is a huge source of CO2 as well. Then you would arrive at your destination, use public transportation as well. You will also likely engage in many activities related to your holiday. I cannot name exactly what type of, let's say, activities, but let us say that your activities started from drinking bottled water and throwing them in bins would likely engender CO2 emissions. So read the text and find out if you are right. Stay home this summer. Carbon dioxide, CO2, speeds up global warming. And one of the biggest threats to the environment is the 26 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide that humans generate each year. The average European emits around 10 metric tons of CO2, and for the average American, the figure is much higher. Our carbon footprint is a calculation of the CO2 we emit, and almost everything we do increases it, from turning on our coffee maker to using our mobile phone. Traveling by car is bad, and flying is much worse, but it is not a simple calculation. Kilometers per passenger, a plane journey produces roughly the same amount of CO2 as a car journey, or slightly less if it is a large car. But cars are less harmful because the distances people travel by plane tend to be much greater. An average long-haul flight generates 4 tons of CO2 per passenger. And because CO2 is emitted higher up in the atmosphere, it does more damage. So one of the most effective things we can do to reduce our carbon footprint is take fewer flights, and why not take your holiday at home this year? The idea communicated in this text is that traveling either by car or by plane would harm the environment because of the amount of CO2 emitted. So cars, they produce or they emit CO2 in large quantities. And sometimes a car, a journey or traveling by car is bad for the environment, as much as a plane would also harm the environment, because planes, they are up high in the sky, so the CO2 emission would harm the atmosphere directly. So the carbon footprint here is the total amount of CO2 your activities produce, either directly by driving a car or indirectly by using a washing machine which uses electricity generated at a power station. The period used to measure these CO2 emissions is normally a year. Choose the correct word below. CO2, we say, is bad or worse for the environment because it speeds up global warming. So here we have bad, we have worse. Adjective and a comparative form of this irregular adjective. So actually we say CO2 is bad for the environment because it speeds up global warming. We are going to see later why we did not use the comparative form of bad. Generally speaking, Americans have a larger carbon footprint than Europeans. Third sentence, a large car emits more or less CO2 per kilometer per passenger than a plane. So in fact, a large car emits more CO2 per kilometer per passenger than a plane. And this is stated in the text. Car journeys are less damaging to the environment than plane journeys because passengers usually travel fewer or lower kilometers. In fact, we say fewer kilometers. One of the best or good ways to reduce our impact on the environment is to take our holidays at home. And we say one of the best ways to reduce our impact on the environment is to take our holiday at home. Complete the language notes. Use the words and phrases from the list. So here we are going to learn about comparatives and superlatives. I would like to highlight the fact that comparatives or comparative adjective shows when two persons or objects are being compared. Whereas superlative or superlative adjective, it indicates or it compares one thing to all the others in the same group. Like I say, Burj Khalifa is the highest tower in the Arab world. So here I am comparing Burj Khalifa to all of the towers in the Arab world. So with comparatives we use than. For instance, I say Tom is taller than Henry. And for this, I inflect an ER to the adjective tall. So it becomes taller. As for the case of superlatives, we add or we inflect an EST to the adjective. So for instance, I say Tom is the tallest among his peers. So I say the tallest. So I add the before tall and I inflect an EST at the end. So with comparing two or three things. With short adjectives, we add an ER or EST to form comparatives and superlatives. Example, high, higher in the case of comparatives, and the highest in the case of the superlative. We say also big, bigger, and the biggest. So with long adjectives, we use more and most or less and least. So more, its opposite is less. Most, its opposite is least. Most and least are used with the superlatives and therefore we add the in front of them. So effective, more effective in the case of comparatives, and the most effective in the case of the superlative. We say method A is more effective than method B. We say method A is the most effective method among the methods used. Harmful, the comparative form is less harmful, and the least harmful in the case of the superlative. So note that more, its opposite is less, whereas most, its opposite is the least. The most, the least. Remember, these common adjectives are irregular. Good, better, the best. Bad, the comparative is worse. The superlative is the worst. So now we move to comparing quantities. Use more and most with countable or uncountable nouns, like more kilometers. The most CO2, kilometers. A kilometer is a countable noun. CO2 is an uncountable noun. Use less, least, with uncountable nouns. Use fewer, fewest, with countable nouns. We say, we can generate less CO2 by taking fewer flights. So CO2 is uncountable, whereas flights are countable. Describing the size of difference now. We use much, far, or a lot to describe big differences, and we use a little, a bit, or slightly to describe a small one or a small difference. So we say the figure is much higher. It is far higher, and we say it is a lot higher. Or we can say, when describing small differences, the figure is a little lower, it's a bit lower, and we can say it is slightly lower. In our first lesson, we have seen a flow chart. So now let us take a look at a bar chart. So in this bar chart, we can see countries. Also, we can see metric tons of CO2 per capita per annum. Capita means per head. It is a Latin word. Or per person. Per annum, annum also is a Latin word, and it means per year. So metric tons of CO2 per capita per annum. So, does your country appear in this bar chart? If so, where does it fall? If not, where do you think it would be? So actually, Algeria does not figure in this bar chart, and I leave it to you students to decide where would it fall. Are these statements true or false? Correct the wrong ones and compare your answers with another student. Did any of the statistics surprise you? So our first question is, people in Qatar, let me use the pointer. So people in Qatar produce the least CO2. When we say the least, we are talking about the smallest amount, okay? Or, yeah, the smallest amount in comparison with the other countries in the bar chart. But in fact, Qatar produces the most CO2. Or Qatar has the most CO2 production in comparison, or when compared to other countries which do figure in this bar chart. So it is false. And we say the USA has the highest CO2. When we say the highest, we are using the superlative form. So we are comparing the USA to all of the other countries which are present in this list or in this bar chart. So I say the USA has the highest CO2 emissions per capita, and Indonesia has the lowest. So we have the highest and the lowest. In fact, Qatar has the highest CO2 emission, whereas Vietnam has the lowest. So this statement is false. Okay, we move to our next set of sentences. The average Chinese person has roughly the same carbon footprint as someone from Thailand. So let us check China. China is here. So the average Chinese person has roughly the same carbon footprint as someone from Thailand. So, China and Thailand. Look at the figures. So I say they are pretty much close, and it is a true statement. The carbon footprint of someone in the Czech Republic is slightly bigger than the carbon footprint of someone in Singapore. So here's the Czech Republic, and this is Singapore. So the carbon footprint of someone in the Czech Republic is slightly bigger, but in fact it is slightly smaller than the carbon footprint of someone in Singapore. So this statement is false because the carbon footprint of someone in the Czech Republic is slightly smaller than the carbon footprint of someone in Singapore. We move to our, I think, last set of sentences, and we say, people in India produce much less CO2 than people in Russia. India, Russia. Yes, and it is true. CO2 emissions from Poland are far worse than CO2 emissions from Italy. So, Poland and Italy, and I think they are identical, or they produce pretty much the same CO2 per capita per annum, and this statement is false. So, here are some actions we could take to reduce our carbon footprint. Which would have the greatest impact? Rank them from 1, most effective, to 5, the least effective. So we have 5 set of suggestions, or 5 set of sentences that suggest methods or means to reduce our, let's say, impact on the environment or reduce our carbon footprint. First of all, we have using a non-powered mechanical lawn mower. So a lawn mower is a machine that is used to trim the grass in the garden. So instead of using a mechanical lawn mower, we could use the conventional or the traditional lawn mower. So could this method be the most effective? Eating meat-free meals every other day. So in this sentence suggests that for meat to be, let's say, delivered to our houses or to our butchers, it passes through a lot of processes. Complicated processes, from, let's say, transporting the cattle to, let's say, slaughtering the cattle, to preparing, packaging, and then transporting back to the butcher, or transporting to the butcher. So could this be the most effective method? Removing ourselves from junk mail lists so we do not receive unwanted letters in the post. Because, you know, junk mail, it involves a lot of publicity, a lot of printed papers and images, so ink, printing, etc. It would engender a huge amount of CO2. Then, switching to reusable cleaning products instead of paper towels. So instead of using paper towels, which we use and then throw to be recycled, which involves a huge, let's say, set of complicated processes that would engender CO2 emissions, we could depend on cloth towels, which are more durable. Last, buying books from used bookstores or borrowing them from our friends instead of buying new ones. So could this method be the most effective? Let us check. So the most effective method is eating meat-free meals every other day. Second one is removing ourselves from the junk mail. Third one, using a non-powered mechanical lawnmower that we push to mow the grass. The fourth is buying books from used bookstores or borrowing them. And last, switching to reusable cleaning products instead of paper towels. So work in pairs, think of more things we can do as individuals to reduce our carbon footprints. And here we can see just as a set of 2 examples. First of all, taking fewer flights. And we already explained why traveling by plane is harmful for the environment, or installing more insulation in our homes, which would reduce our dependency on electricity and heaters. Look at your list and discuss which actions would have the greatest impact on global warming. Which methods of reducing carbon emissions would you find the most difficult to implement? And which things have you already tried? CO2 emissions speed up global warming. What signs of global warming are you the most concerned about? Some of these questions have been covered in our, video conference, and we attempted to answer some of these questions. So for any further information, for any documentation, you can head to your Google Classroom, wherein you will find extra, images, pictures, and resources that are related to comparatives and superlatives. Thank you so much for your attendance.